I noticed it after school one afternoon when I got into my car and had to stretch my leg just to reach the pedals because the seat was shoved almost all the way back, farther than I could ever sit comfortably, and for a second I just froze there with my backpack half off my shoulder trying to convince myself I must have adjusted it without thinking, even though I'm 5'2" and always keep it pulled close to the steering wheel with the mirrors angled tight so I can see around the huge SUVs in the school parking lot, and I know exactly how it feels when I sit down, so I pushed the seat forward again, fixed the mirrors, and drove home telling myself maybe my dad had borrowed it, except when I asked him at dinner he looked confused and said he hadn't touched it in weeks, and my mom said the same, and that was when a small uncomfortable feeling started sitting in my chest. But I tried to ignore it until 2 days later when it happened again, only this time the rearview mirror was tilted sharply upward like someone taller had been using it, and the driver's seat was not only pushed back but reclined slightly, and the radio volume was turned down to 0 even though I always leave it at the same level because I hate loud surprises when I start the engine, and there was a faint smell inside the car that wasn't mine, something like damp fabric and stale air, and I checked the doors and they were locked, no broken windows, nothing stolen, which somehow made it worse, because if someone wanted to take something they would have, but instead it felt like they had just been sitting there, and that night I made sure to lock the car twice and watched the headlights flash. Then around 2 a.m. I woke up for no clear reason, just that prickling awareness like when you think someone is standing too close behind you, and my room faces the driveway so I slowly moved the curtain a fraction of an inch and stared out at the dark shape of my car under the streetlight glow from down the block, and at first everything looked normal until I noticed the faintest movement inside, not dramatic, just a subtle shift like someone adjusting their posture, and my stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a step on the stairs, because there was definitely a silhouette in the driver's seat, darker than the shadows around it, completely still, and I couldn't see a face but I could see the outline of a head, and I stayed frozen, barely breathing, watching as the brake light suddenly flared red once, then went dark, then flared again, slow and deliberate, like someone testing the pedal without turning the engine on. And I stumbled back from the window and ran to my parents' room shaking so badly I couldn't get words out at first, and my dad grabbed a flashlight and called the police while we all stood in the hallway listening, and from outside we heard the soft click of a car door closing and then footsteps moving quickly down the street, and by the time officers arrived the driveway was empty except for my car sitting there innocently with the driver's door unlocked, the seat still warm according to my dad when he touched it, and the mirrors angled perfectly for someone at least a foot taller than me, and the police didn't find forced entry but they did find something tucked up inside the wheel well taped carefully out of sight, a copied spare key that didn't belong to us, which meant whoever it was hadn't broken in at all, they had been letting themselves in quietly whenever they wanted, sitting in my parked car at night for reasons I still don't understand, maybe watching the house, maybe watching my window. And even after we changed the locks and installed cameras and started parking in the garage, I still sometimes hesitate before opening the driver's door, because every now and then the seat feels slightly farther back than I remember leaving it, just enough to make me question whether I really fixed it the last time, or whether someone is still finding a way to sit there in the dark when we're asleep. I'm precise about money the way some people are precise about time. Not obsessive, but I've kept a rough mental ledger my whole adult life, always knowing approximately what's in my wallet without checking. It's a habit from growing up without much. So when $20 went missing the first time I noticed immediately, standing in a gas station line on a Thursday morning, pulling out my wallet and finding 60 where I was certain I'd had 80. I paid, drove to work, and spent the day constructing explanations. I'd been tired. I'd bought coffee and forgotten. I let it go. The following Thursday I was 40 short. I had counted that morning. I'd had $120 when I left for work. I came home to 80. I lived alone. The apartment had been locked all day. I checked every window, examined the door lock for scratches with my phone flashlight. Nothing. Nothing missing except the $40, which was somehow worse than if something larger had been taken. $40 wasn't a burglary. It was something else. I bought a small combination safe and kept my cash there as a test. 2 weeks of nothing. I relaxed. Then I left 60 in my wallet deliberately and came home Thursday to find 40. Always Thursday. Always $30 to $50. Always while I was at work. I wrote down every instance I could reconstruct and sat with the list and felt the unease of a pattern that implies intention. A locksmith found no signs of picking or copying. I asked about master keys, only the superintendent and the property management company had them. I changed the locks myself, a deadbolt with the only key in my possession. The following Thursday I came home $20 short. I sat on the couch for a long time. My sister suggested something I'd been circling without landing on. Older buildings sometimes have shared crawlspaces between units. Mine was from the 1960s. I went through every wall and ceiling with new attention and found a panel in the bedroom closet, high up above the shelf, that I'd always assumed was a plumbing access point. The paint around its edges was fractured in a way that suggested it had been moved. I called the police. Detective Okafor came and agreed the panel showed signs of disturbance. The panel connected to a utility crawlspace running between units on my floor. The neighboring apartment had been vacant 2 months. Inside it, beneath its own access panel, she found a folded cloth on the floor, scuff marks, and in the corner a notebook with dates and dollar amounts in 2 columns, the right consistently smaller than the left by $30 to $50, every Thursday, going back 9 months. 4 months before I'd noticed anything. A key in the corner, labeled in small handwriting with my apartment number. The vacant apartment had been accessed through a fire door on the back stairwell with a lock unchanged since 2019. The man they identified had no connection to the building. What he had was knowledge of its layout and a methodology so restrained it had nearly worked indefinitely. He took small enough amounts that most people wouldn't notice, from wallets rather than safes because wallets are where people keep cash they track loosely. He'd counted on that. They arrested him 3 weeks later. Prior trespassing charges in 2 other cities. No fixed address. What I think about is the notebook. The careful columns, 9 months of Thursdays in neat handwriting. The 4 months before I noticed, during which I'd cooked dinner and watched television and slept while someone moved through the space above my ceiling, taking only enough to stay invisible. It wasn't desperation. It had been thought through, refined, sustained. I was a system someone had learned to exploit. Not the money, the study that preceded it. The patient, invisible attention of someone who had watched long enough to know exactly how much I'd never notice was gone. The first one I assumed was a mistake. A brown paper bag from a Thai place 3 blocks away, left on my doormat on a Wednesday evening with no note, no receipt, no name. Just the bag, still warm, exactly the kind of food I would have ordered if I'd been ordering, pad CEW, spring rolls, that specific coconut soup I'd gotten twice from that exact restaurant. I looked up and down the hallway, knocked on my neighbor's door thinking it was meant for her. She hadn't ordered anything. I called the restaurant and they confirmed the order had been paid for in full, placed online, delivery address listed as mine. They had no name for the account. They said it happened sometimes with gift orders and seemed unbothered. I ate it. I know how that sounds now. The second arrived the following Wednesday. Italian this time, from a place in my neighborhood I'd been meaning to try, one of those restaurants that sits on your mental list for months without ever quite becoming a plan. Fettuccine, bread, tiramisu. Again paid for, again no note, again my exact address. I called the restaurant. Same story, online order, paid in full, no account name they could give me. I didn't eat the second one. I stood in my kitchen looking at it for a long time and then put it in the trash and called my sister. She suggested a secret admirer, said it was almost romantic, and I tried to borrow her lightness about it and couldn't. Because the restaurant I'd been meaning to try was somewhere I'd thought about privately. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I hadn't searched it on my phone or added it to any list. I had simply driven past it twice and registered it in the loose way you register things you intend to do eventually. The third delivery was from a cafe I'd visited once, 8 months ago, in a different part of the city. I'd had a sandwich there I'd thought about afterward, in that particular way good food stays with you. I had told no one about it. I had never gone back. The delivery was that exact sandwich. I went to the police. An officer took my statement and I watched him decide, as I was speaking, that this was unusual rather than dangerous. No threats, no contact, no note of any kind. Just food. He said he'd look into the payment method and asked me not to eat anything else that arrived. He said it like a suggestion rather than a warning, which told me where on his priority list it sat. I put a camera in my hallway pointed at the front door. I started keeping a log, dates, restaurants, what was ordered. The deliveries came every Wednesday without exception, always between 6 and 7 in the evening, always a different restaurant, always something I had a private connection to. A place I'd eaten years ago on a first date. A specific dish my mother used to make that a restaurant across town apparently replicated closely enough to be chosen. Things that required not just knowing my address but knowing me, the interior record of preferences and memories that exists nowhere written down. After the 6th delivery the officer called back. The payment method was a prepaid card, purchased with cash, registered to a name that didn't match any ID on file. The online accounts used to place the orders were made with temporary email addresses that had since been deleted. Each order placed from a different IP address. Whoever it was had been careful in a way that took effort, and the effort itself was the most frightening thing anyone told me during those weeks, that this much thought had gone into something that looked, on the surface, like kindness. I moved my doormat inside and set the camera to alert me in real time. The following Wednesday I watched on my phone as a delivery driver set the bag down, took a photo for confirmation, and left. I went into the hallway 30 seconds after he disappeared into the elevator. I looked at the bag and did not touch it and called the restaurant immediately. The driver, when the restaurant contacted him, said the order had been placed the normal way and he had no information beyond the delivery address. He was a contracted driver. He'd delivered hundreds of orders that week. The deliveries stopped in the 11th week. No explanation, no final note, just an ordinary Wednesday evening with nothing on my doormat. Then another, and another. I didn't feel relieved. I felt watched in a different way, the way you feel watched when the thing watching you has decided to stop letting you know it's there. I never found out who it was. The police investigation stalled at the prepaid card and the deleted accounts. My building's exterior cameras showed delivery drivers and nothing else, no one loitering, no one watching my door. Whoever had chosen those restaurants had done so without ever appearing anywhere I could point to.